Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heads Up, the weekly webcast and podcast of the National Headache Foundation. I'm Dr. Lindsay Weitzel, migraine strategist, founder of the Facebook group Migraine Nation and chronic daily migraine survivor. I am here this week with Dr. Tim Smith. Dr. Smith is a regular on our podcast and webcast. Dr. Smith is the CEO of Study Metrics Research. He has conducted numerous clinical trials in the area of medications and devices in migraine, and he is also the Vice President of the National Headache Foundation. Hi, Dr. Smith. How are you today?
I'm Dr. Weitzel. How are you?
I'm good. So today we have kind of a fun topic. We're going to talk about a new device that has recently been approved by the FDA. The device is called the Q-Collar. It was developed to protect against mild traumatic brain injury caused by concussive events. It's kind of a funny story because it was developed, my favorite thing about it is it was inspired by the woodpecker and the way the woodpecker tends to avoid concussions. It is a device shaped like the letter C. It goes around the back of your neck and the back of your neck and the sides of your neck. And it's sort of used to aid in keeping you from getting a concussion if you're participating in activities where you may end up with a mild traumatic brain injury. So, Dr. Smith, can you tell us a little bit about how the Q-Collar helps in protecting us from a mild traumatic brain injury?
Sure, and I love the discussion around the woodpeckers. You know, if you think about repetitive brain injury, and it makes you wonder why the woods are not littered with unconscious woodpeckers. But the fact of the matter is that you know, this all has to do with something. Believe it or not, we call it brain slosh. It sounds horrible, but you know, the brain is sort of suspended inside the cranium, and this acceleration deceleration injuries allows the brain to slosh, literally kind of move and sort of slam up and back against the internal aspects of the cranium.
Right.
And as it turns out, that kind of stressful sloshing of the brain kind of twists and tears neurons and their axons, or their nerve projections that you know, connect. And through even, you know, minor acceleration, deceleration injuries, that kind of repeated sloshing of the brain can cause small tears and repetitively until the patient starts to develop neurologic symptoms from that. And that's what we see with that, what we call chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It's sort of a brain dysfunction that comes from having your head banged too many times, and it's proven to be quite a problem. And so this Q-Collar device, and as you said, it's sort of a horseshoe-shaped device that sits around the neck, and it has the side pieces come. It doesn't connect all the way in the front, but it presses gently on the internal jugular veins. It's the vein that allows blood to drain out of the cranium, the blood vessels that allows blood to drain out of the cranium and return to the heart. And this puts pressure there, and it kind of holds it back and allows the brain, the veins inside the cranium, the skull, to fill up, and it occupies more space. And so there's less room for the brain to, you know, be tossed about inside the cranium if there's a repetitive injury. So it was kind of a theoretical thing, thinking about woodpeckers, and what woodpeckers have a more densely packed cranium, and they don't have slosh room in there. And so the thinking was, well, how do you do that in humans? And somebody came up with this idea to just allow the blood to back up in there, and sort of, it still drains out. It's not like it's a tourniquet on your neck or cutting off blood flow, but it sort of slows the return of the blood out of the brain, pumps up through the carotid arteries, drains out through the jugular veins, and that just allows it to have a more fuller contents in the cranium. So it, you know, try to make woodpeckers out of these ball players, I guess.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. And I love the visual of, this is the reason there's not forests full of unconscious woodpeckers. So my next question to you is, I think that this is probably running through most people's minds right now, because we have an audience of people who have migraine or other chronic headaches. if you're changing the volume of blood in the brain or altering this sort of thing, to me, is this going to give me a migraine or give me a headache? Is one of the side effects a migraine or a headache?
And it's a great question that we don't have a straight up answer for, but we are aware that even mild perturbances to homeostasis, or just the state of natural balance that's in the brain, of any disturbances of that in migraine patients, tends to uh, potentially increase their risk of having a migraine attack. But we don't know that this does that. But I just, since you asked the question, it does, make me want to scratch my head and think about it a little bit. But the good news is we didn't see any reports of headache with its use, and surely in the hundreds of young people that they used to study this,
Mm-hmm.
there would have been some migraine kids involved in that, and we
Right.
didn't really see any increased uptick. But it's a great question. I think as we get more used to it of it, we'll know more about how to answer that question.
Okay. So what side effects or contraindications were found in the studies of the Q collar?
Well, so the side effects are not many. It's, it takes, like anything, it probably takes a little getting used to. And incidentally, when you look at the study design for the big pivotal study that they used, it was, they did have control groups and everything. It wasn't blinded
Mm-hmm.
because the kids knew whether they had on a collar or not. But there was a study of 284 subjects, and they were 13 and older and playing high school football. And basically, what they did is about half of the kids wore the Q collar through practices and games throughout the season, and half of the kids did not. And and they also wore these accelerometer devices. It's basically it's like a little navigator device that is, I presume, is part of their helmet apparatus. But it detects when they have like one of these acceleration deceleration injuries, and they can quantitate it to make sure there are no differences between groups. And what they did is they had an MRI done before the season started, and then another one done after the end of the study. So that was kind of an eloquent design. And what they saw was that 73% of the group that didn't wear the no collar group
Right.
had white matter changes on their due to the repetitive subconcussive injuries that they were
Right.
experiencing through the course of the season. That's 106 out of the 145. And in contradistinction, the kids who did not that did wear the collar, the collar wearing group, 77% of them had no changes. So it's almost like a complete opposite. About 3/4 did have changes in the no collar group, and the collar
Right.
group had about 3/4 that had no changes at all. And that was very, very telling and very compelling that you get that kind of what looked like protection, from this. And that's the basis on which the FDA has approved this. The side effects were few, but there are some contraindications or issues for which the collar has not been tested and should not be used on athletes. And it includes things that have increased pressure inside the skull. So
Right.
things like pseudotumor.
And pseudotumor is anyone out there who has, if you have high pressure headache, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
Yeah, that's intracranial hypertension is the other name for it. So it's increased central or cerebrospinal fluid pressure
Right.
in the brain. And most of if people have been diagnosed know what they have. So it's kind of a pressure situation.
Mm-hmm.
Other things include anything that would cause an accumulation of fluid around the brain, seizure disorders, presence of brain or spinal shunts, kids that have those shunts from the brain because of increased fluid collections, usually from birth or shortly thereafter.
Right.
Anybody that has a neck problem, airway obstructions, trachea issues, or there's something called carotid hypersensitivity. It's there may not be a lot of people that walk around knowing that, but it's if you put pressure on the carotid bulb, there's in the carotid artery. This would have to be a pretty hard and deep pressure there. So But until that's proven to be safe on that, anyone who is known to have carotid hypersensitivity shouldn't do it. And then anything else that would be abnormal blood vessels or blood clots in the brain or some neck injury or abnormality, you probably should be very careful with that. Interestingly, those folks would probably not be people playing contact sports, if they knew they had an issue like that. So.
Right. So you keep using the word kids, which I'm sure a lot of people are zoning in on, because we have a lot of parents in our audience who worry about their children playing contact sports because they're probably genetically predisposed to migraine, etc. So there's so few devices we talk about that are approved for people under the age of 18. Is this one approved for kids under the age of 18?
The FDA has approved it for 13 and older, and it was
Okay.
largely based on this study. There's not really an upper age for it. There are some neck sizes that have to be taken into account, because they make some different sizes. It has to be sized. The patient takes a circumference measurement around their neck. It's a process. They take
Right.
three measurements and take the average, and then they have a range of sizes that can be deployed to be utilized, and that's how they do it. But yeah, 13 and up is the range, and it's perfect for most the older junior high kids and all high school kids, college.
Okay.
It's going to be interesting to see what the uptake is on this, and how far it penetrates and whether teams are going to endorse using it. That kind of thing. It's only just recently approved in the U.S. and so I'm not sure how that's going to be taken up by schools and sports clubs and things like that.
Right. And let's just clarify, is it made to be used with other protective equipment like helmets, pads, etc.?
Yeah, this is not a substitute for the usual safety equipment. They used it in the studies along with the usual pads, helmets, all of the other protective gear used by high school football students, football players as it pertains to this study. But you can see how it would be useful for, anyone who has repeated, acceleration, deceleration, head injuries or head contact, subconcussive contact events.
Okay. Do you see potential for use of the Q collar outside of athletics? Are there any other uses being investigated for this device?
Well, I think, military use would be, clearly one area. I think there's something like over 300,000 traumatic brain injuries amongst veterans, just in the last 20 years, since 2000. And that's not just an artifact of increased reporting. I think, there are a lot of military reasons why this is happening, but the military would be the primary, next target, I would think. I'm not sure if the company's probably been looking at it already, but I'm not sure. It'll be interesting. Right now, they've been focusing mostly on sports-related, injuries. There's been something like more than 50% increase in emergency room visits for traumatic brain injuries amongst recreational reasons, just in the last decade and a half or so. So this is something that the awareness is up, but also I think the occurrences are up as well.
Okay. And then do we know, so it's been approved just recently by the FDA. Do we know when it'll actually be available to us?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any information on that. I know it's commercially available in Canada, and you can read about it online. There's a Canadian website, and it actually asks you if you're a resident of Canada or not before they will send it to you, because it's not technically, up until the FDA has approved it. It hasn't been approved for U.S. citizens or approved by the U.S. authorities to be marketed, purchased in the United States. So I would imagine, since it's already marketed in another country, then as soon as they have their supply chain issues in order, then they'll be able to make it available to to those of us in the United States.
And are we going to need a prescription to get the Q collar, or is it going to be over the counter?
It looks like it's going to be over the counter. It's over
Okay.
the counter in Canada. I believe it's going to be over the counter here. The Canadian website has it priced at $249. and it's recommended that it can be worn for up to 4 hours at a time, and has an approved, life expectancy or duration of usefulness of 2 years. So if you buy one, it should be good for 2 years of use. So for high school athletes, two school years apparently. Right. And unless that changes, it's still, that would be if it's going to be priced about the same here as Canada, then it would be about, that's a little over $100 a year if you wanted to break it down that way. I don't know that it'll be priced the same, but that's what they advertise online for it. And I guess in Canada you just buy it online from the company. I couldn't find any other retail outlets or anything that carried it, but that may change in the U.S. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add to this discussion on the Q collar?
Well, I think we've covered it pretty well. It's going to be interesting to see, how this is going to be taken up. I mean, as much of a problem as these traumatic brain injuries have been to college and high school athletes of any age, really, with these repetitive injuries. It's not, and I guess I should point out one additional point on this is this is not approved as a treatment for concussion.
No.
Okay,
Right.
so if people have a concussed brain or a concussion injury already, it's not designed to treat that, but it's used to try to prevent this chronic traumatic injury. And you think about those kids in the study that had these, just from having just a regular normal season, on average, they were much more likely to have these white matter changes, which is the conducting, channels of how the brain nerve signals get conducted electronically, I guess would be the way you would think about it. And so it can be disruptive over time. Now that repeated injury to nerves due to the brain sloshing is the problem. So, I don't have any kids playing sports nowadays, but if I did, I would really look into this very carefully, and I'll be interested to see what coaches and athletic directors and people who run sports teams are going to do with this, because it seems like a pretty simple intervention that's well tolerated. Right. It could have some lasting life-changing impact on people going forward.
Right, and I do think it is very interesting, especially for our audience, that at least with the data we have now, it doesn't seem to cause headache in anyone or migraine in anyone. So that's important for everyone to know.
Yeah, I think clearly the benefit outweighs the risks from what we know now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Smith, for joining us today. And thank you everyone for being here. And please join us again next week on Heads Up, the weekly webcast and podcast of the National Headache Foundation.